Tu Tien sat inside the cave, her eyes fixed silently on the envelope of money that CEO Tien had left. That money could help her make ends meet, it could buy clothes and food, yet she could not use it. Since the day she left Tien's house, she had vowed to live by her own hands, no matter how difficult things became, and never rely on anyone. She tucked the envelope into a corner, took a deep breath and then stood up. Slinging her bamboo basket over her shoulder, she decided to head into the forest to cut down trees to sell. Her bare feet moved quietly along the trail covered with dry leaves as sunlight filtered through the canopy, casting scattered beams across her worn shirt. Arriving at the familiar forest, she scanned the area for bamboo and timber that could be harvested. With her sharp little knife, she carefully began cutting off sections of wood, neatly arranging them and binding them into bundles. Sweat beaded on her forehead, and her thin, calloused hands worked tirelessly. Although the labor was exhausting, she understood that only hard work could keep her independent without owing anyone. After gathering enough wood, she hoisted the heavy bundles onto her back and slowly made her way down to the market. Along the road, her legs trembled with fatigue, yet she pressed on with determination. At the market, she set the bundles down in a corner, catching her breath for a moment before starting to call out to potential buyers. Market-goers gradually took notice of her. Some, familiar with her situation, compassionately bought her goods, while others looked on with curiosity. But Tu Tien paid them no mind. She focused solely on selling her wood, hoping to earn enough money to buy the essentials for daily life. After a while, most of the wood was sold. Although the money she earned was modest, to her it represented the fruits of honest labor. Carefully counting the cash in her hand, she then stepped into a small convenience store and selected a few household items such as salt, cooking oil, and some dried food to bring back to the cave. Leaving the market, she felt a sense of relief. Though life was still challenging, she knew that by persevering she could take care of herself without having to rely on the pity of others. As the late afternoon sun softened and her small shadow slowly disappeared along the dirt road, the resolve in her eyes remained strong, shining with the determination never to give up. Tuan sat in his office, his eyes fixed on the computer screen as he reviewed documents on the project's progress. The project was at a critical stage, and he needed to visit the site personally to assess the situation. Just then, his secretary entered, softly knocking on the door and saying, "Tuan, the project site needs you for an urgent inspection. The team of engineers is waiting." Without hesitation, he nodded, quickly gathered his documents and left the office with his secretary. The car rolled along the dirt road leading to the construction site, where the sounds of machinery echoed and workers bustled about. At the site, Tuan stepped out of the vehicle, donned his hard hat, and joined the team of engineers for the inspection. As he examined the emerging roadway, he felt pleased, yet carefully scrutinized every detail. "This road needs extra reinforcement to prevent landslides when the rainy season arrives," reported one of the engineers. Tuan nodded and discussed the next steps. At that moment, a familiar figure caught his eye. Tu Tien, carrying her old bamboo basket, was walking across the site. When she saw him, she paused. After a brief hesitation, she took a deep breath and hurried toward him, clutching a fabric bag tightly in her hands. "Tuan!" she called out, her voice slightly rushed. He turned around, looking at her in surprise. "Are you all right?" Without replying, Tu Tien opened the bag and took out the envelope of money that he had left earlier. "You gave me this money, but I cannot accept it. I want to return it." Tuan regarded her with a hint of surprise in his eyes. He understood how hard her life was, yet she was determined to refuse help. Gently, he pushed the envelope toward her. "Please, keep it. This is not charity, but a sincere offer of help." Tu Tien shook her head firmly. "I know you mean well, but I want to earn my living on my own. I cannot take all of this money." She opened the envelope, took only a small portion, and resolutely returned the rest. Tuan fell silent for a moment, then smiled softly, no longer pressing the matter. "All right, but if you ever need help, don't hesitate to come to me." Tu Tien nodded, feeling a sense of relief. She knew he truly wanted to help her, yet she still wished to stand on her own 2 feet. She bowed her head in thanks and turned away, her bamboo basket heavy on her back, but her heart feeling light. Tuan watched her leave, filled with admiration. This young woman, despite all the hardships she had endured, remained resilient and never lost her sense of dignity. Tu Tien returned to her cave after a long, exhausting day. The evening breeze blew through, carrying a chill that seeped into every thread of her worn clothing. As she looked around her small cave, she sighed. Although she had grown accustomed to this life, there were times when loneliness overwhelmed her with hazy thoughts of the past. She set down her bamboo basket, straightened her back, and slung a small bucket over her shoulder before following the nearby stream to fetch some water. Her bare feet silently brushed against the cool water as she bent down, carefully scooping up handfuls of water. Staring into the clear stream that reflected her gaunt face, she couldn't help but feel a deep sorrow. She once had a home, once had a family, but now it was only her, facing a harsh fate. On her way back, she gathered a few wild greens along the path. Her calloused hands reached up to snap off tender young leaves, carefully placing them into her basket. She didn't have many food choices, but every stalk of greens and every grain of rice was earned through her own hard work, and for that reason, even in its simplicity, it was cherished. Back in the cave, she built a small fire, placed a pot on the stove, and added the rice. In the flickering light of the fire, memories began to flood back. She remembered the days when she still lived at Tien's house, the countless times she had endured hardship to maintain a semblance of a home, only to be mercilessly cast aside in the end. She recalled the bitter words of her harsh mother-in-law and the unfaithful husband. All of it felt like a biting wind that chilled her heart. She bowed her head and gently stirred the pot of porridge, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. She did not want to cry, yet the long-held feelings of humiliation and despair overwhelmed her. When the porridge was ready, she ladled a small bowl, blew on it to cool it, and slowly brought it to her lips. The simple flavor of the porridge and its subtle aroma did little to ease the bitterness inside her. She thought of family meals and the laughter of days gone by, now replaced by an endless void. Sitting in a quiet corner, she felt the warmth of the porridge seep into her hands, though it could not warm her heart. She had lost everything, and there was no one by her side. Tears quietly fell down her cheeks. She did not weep loudly or cast blame on anyone. She simply allowed the tears to flow as silently as her thoughts. In the stillness of the night, the whisper of the wind outside seemed to murmur all the sorrow contained within. She knew that she had to keep living, but she wondered when the pain would finally subside, and would there ever come a day when she could find a place that truly belonged to her. Under the morning sun, Tu Tien slung her bamboo basket over her shoulder and slowly walked along the trail leading into the forest. In recent days, as the season began to change, sudden downpours had made her cave damp and even colder. She needed a temporary shelter, at least one that could protect her from both rain and harsh sunlight during stormy days. She entered the dense bamboo forest, where sunlight filtered through the lush green canopy. Her eyes scanned intently as she selected the straightest, sturdiest bamboo for building a shelter. With her small knife in hand, she carefully cut each piece of bamboo and stripped palm fronds to bring back. The rhythmic sound of her knife echoed through the quiet woods, blending with the chirping of birds and the rustle of the wind in the leaves. After gathering enough materials, Tien tied the bundle of bamboo tightly, hoisted it over her shoulder, and quietly made her way back. The mountain road was rough, and the heavy load sometimes forced her to pause for breath, yet she pressed onward. She knew that she could not rely on anyone else. Only her own two hands could secure her survival. Back at her cave, she set the bamboo bundle down, dusted off her worn shirt, and quickly got to work. She measured carefully as she erected each bamboo piece to serve as a support column, using forest vines to secure them firmly. Large leaves were layered on top to form a simple roof, just enough to shield against the rain and sun. Each drop of sweat rolling down her forehead and the calluses on her hands testified to her tireless effort, yet her eyes remained resolute. She had little in material wealth, but she possessed the determination to keep living. Late in the afternoon, the small shelter was finally complete. Tu Tien stood silently, gazing at her handiwork with a quiet sense of pride. It was not spacious or particularly sturdy, but it was a shelter built by her own hands. A refuge she could call her own. She sat down at the shelter's entrance and looked into the distance. The sky was beginning to darken, and a cool breeze carried the scent of forest earth. She knew that life would continue to be challenging, but she had grown used to that reality. Gathering some dry leaves and small sticks, she built a fire near her shelter. The flickering flames lit her gaunt face as warmth spread, pushing back the chill of the forest evening. After a long day of labor, her body was exhausted, yet her heart felt a little lighter. She sipped some water slowly and closed her eyes, savoring the rare moment of peace. Though she was alone and life remained harsh, Tu Tien stood firm. She no longer depended on anyone or expected rescue. From that day forward, she resolved to take care of herself and build a new life, even if it meant embracing solitude. One late afternoon, CEO Tuan was sitting in his home office, phone in hand, as he processed work tasks. His schedule was always packed, but today an inexplicable urge pushed him to step outside, inspect the progress at his construction site, and breathe in some fresh air after many hours of intense work. He got into his car and drove along rugged dirt roads that led to the project site. Along the way, he even stopped to help a motorcyclist with a broken-down bike, sharing a brief conversation before continuing on his journey. As his car wound through the mountainous area, an unexpected sight suddenly caught his attention. There, on a rocky ledge, Tu Tien was building a shelter all by herself. In the gentle afternoon light, the petite young woman was laboriously tying bamboo together to form a frame, carefully arranging each palm frond on the roof to shield against both rain and sun. Watching her resourcefulness and determination, Tuan couldn't help but feel admiration. Without a second thought, he stopped his car, removed his hard hat, and walked over. "Do you need any help?" he asked in a deep, warm voice that startled Tu Tien. She turned around, momentarily surprised to see him. Before she could protest, Tuan rolled up his sleeves and picked up a bamboo pole to help set up the frame. With his assistance, the work came together quickly. Tuan watched him silently. Here was a CEO, unafraid to get his hands dirty, working alongside her to erect her modest shelter. Just as they finished, heavy rain began to fall. The two hurried into the shelter and sat by a small fire, waiting for the storm to pass. The warmth of the fire spread through the small space, dispelling the chill brought by the downpour. "Don't you ever feel lonely living on your own?" Tuan asked, gazing out at the grey sky. Tu Tien remained silent for a moment before offering a bittersweet smile. "Lonely? So what? I'm used to it," she replied softly. Tuan said nothing further, understanding that this young woman had endured enough pain to no longer expect much from others. When the rain finally subsided, he stood up, walked back to his car, and then returned carrying a small package. "Please keep this, it's just a few essential items," he said. Though hesitant at first, Tu Tien eventually accepted the gift with a nod of gratitude. Tuan smiled and then got back into his car to continue with his day. As the rain cleared, Tu Tien sat quietly by the fire, the flickering flames reflected in her eyes, revealing the depth of her thoughts. Perhaps, even amid the storms of life, there were still people willing to offer help without expecting anything in return.
Bóng nhạt nhòa thật sự quá nỗi đau lòng. Mẹ chồng cô không ngần ngại buông những lời cay nghiệt như thể chỉ chờ cơ hội này để trút hết khinh thường lên đầu cô. Cái nhà này cần có cháu đích tôn chứ không phải cần một người đàn bà vô dụng. Từng lời nói chữ dắt dao cứ sâu vào trái tim tự Tiên. Đôi mắt cô đỏ hoe, bàn tay nắm chặt bảo và áo cũ. Cô kìm nén để không bật khóc trước mặt những kẻ chẳng chút thương xót cô. Chiến, người từng đỏ tay gối với cô, người từng hứa hẹn bao điều, giờ đây lại lạnh lùng đứng nhìn không một chút do dự. Cô đã không còn gì trong ánh mắt anh ta. Nỗi đau không còn dừng lại ở những lời miệt thị khi mẹ chồng lớn tiếng đuổi cô ra khỏi nhà. Tự Tiên gần như quỵ xuống. Cô không biết mình đã làm gì sai ngoài việc sinh ra một trong một số phận bất hạnh. Ngày cô về nhà chồng, cô cũng từng e thẹn bước qua bậc cửa này mang theo bao ước mơ về một mái ấm.